This chapter will focus on diseases associated with the nervous system. As far as the nervous system goes, its defenses are structural. The defenses include the bones surrounding the brain and spinal cord, as well as the cerebral spinal fluid. The blood-brain barrier consists of a network of blood vessels that are virtually impenetrable. This protects the brain from entry of pathogens, as well as prevents most antibiotics from reaching the brain. The nervous system is immune privileged and is only able to mount a partial immune response. The central nervous system is so important, and even the smallest immune response would be harmful to it. There are specialized cells called microglia and macrophages that perform defensive functions. They are both phagocytic, but not as strongly as phagocytic cells elsewhere in the body. There is no normal flora present in the central or peripheral nervous system. Should an organism be found, it indicates a disease state. Some microbes, like herpes virus, may be dormant, but aren't considered normal microbiota. Scientific evidence suggests that our gut microbiome has effects on the development of our nervous system. Meningitis is a disease that causes an inflammation of the meninges that surround the brain and spinal cord. The more serious forms of acute meningitis are caused by bacteria. Meningitis that affects infants are caused by different microbes. Meningitis can be diagnosed by various methods, including a spinal tap, Gram stain, and culture of cerebral spinal fluid. Fortunately, treatment is with a broad-spectrum antibiotic. The most frequent symptoms of meningitis are a headache, along with a painful or stiff neck. Patients also experience a fever, vomiting, sensitivity to light, and in some forms a skin rash. There are also a large amount of lymphocytes in the cerebral spinal fluid. One of the causative agents of meningitis is Neisseria meningitidis. This bacterium is associated with epidemics and is the most severe form. The majority of cases are seen in young children who haven't been able to be vaccinated. There are 12 different strains, with serotypes B, C, and V most common in the United States. The microbe enters through droplet contact in the respiratory system. It then moves to the blood and to the meninges. The bacterium releases an endotoxin, which enhances production of the lymphocytes. The blood vessels become damaged, which leads to the petechia, or lesions on the trunk and appendages. Some cases have a high mortality rate. The symptoms include a high fever, sore throat, confusion, petechia, shock, coma, and within a few hours, death. The mode of transmission is droplet contact between individuals in close contact. Typically, there's a higher incidence in late winter and early spring. Humans serve as a reservoir and harbor the pathogen in the nasopharynx. Bacterial meningitis is a medical emergency and must be confirmed or ruled out immediately. Samples can be taken and cultured on chocolate agar and incubated in high levels of carbon dioxide. Gram staining and the oxidase test should also be performed. Luckily, the infection rate is about 1%. However, even with treatment, the disease has a 15% mortality rate, which is why it's so important to start treatment immediately. Those who are in close contact with infected individuals should be treated with rifampin or tetracycline. Meningitis can also be caused by Streptococcus pneumoniae. This bacterium is the most common cause of community-acquired meningitis. It's also called pneumococcus. Roughly 1/4 of patients with pneumococcal meningitis will also exhibit pneumococcal pneumonia. Strep pneumoniae has a capsule which helps it to evade the immune system. It also produces enzymes that rupture red blood cells and damage the nervous system. Respiratory droplets can enter the respiratory system and make its way to the meninges. Treatment for pneumococcal pneumonia should be vancomycin and ceftriaxone. There are two preventative vaccines, Prevnar, which is administered to children, and Pneumovax, which is given to adults. Haemophilus influenzae also causes severe forms of meningitis. Since we have a vaccine, it's not as common here in the United States. Another causative agent is Listeria monocytogenes. This bacterium does not produce a capsule, but is resistant to a wide variety of environments. It has the ability to reside in host cells. In healthy individuals, some nonspecific symptoms like fever, diarrhea, and a sore throat could be seen. In the vulnerable populations, septicemia may occur, and there's a 20% mortality rate. This bacterium has the ability to pass through the placenta or through the birth canal. It could lead to death and premature abortion. This microbe can be found in soil and water. The mode of transmission is through ingestion of contaminated foods. To culture and isolate Listeria, it must be grown in a cold environment. Immunologic and genetic testing may be performed to diagnose this infection. Treatment of Listeria should be with a wide variety of antibiotics. Pasteurization, proper washing, refrigeration, and cooking can help to prevent Listeria. Pregnant women should not eat unpasteurized foods. Viruses can also cause meningitis. Typically, these infections clear up within 2 weeks with a very low mortality rate. In most cases, treatment is not necessary. Neonatal meningitis almost always has a vertical mode of transmission. This occurs either during the pregnancy or through birth. The most common causative agents are Group B streptococci, E. coli, and Listeria monocytogenes. Group B streptococci can be found in roughly 10 to 30% of female genital tracts. The treatment is penicillin G. Women who are high risk are screened, and if Group B streptococci are present, IV antibiotics are administered at active labor. Zika virus is caused by the Zika virus. There are a wide variety of symptoms. In adults, a rash, conjunctivitis, and muscle pain may be seen. Should a baby acquire the virus, the most characteristic symptom seen is microcephaly, or a small head. There may also be vision problems, seizures, and swallowing problems. There are several modes of transmission of the Zika virus. They include the bite of a mosquito, vertical transmission, and sexual contact. There have been cases here in the United States, with the majority of cases arising from travel. There's no vaccine or treatment options. Controlling mosquitoes would be a preventative measure. Poliomyelitis, also known as polio, has a fecal, oral, and vehicle mode of transmission. It leads to neuromuscular paralysis. The number of cases of polio have dramatically decreased, but it has not been completely eradicated. Some signs and symptoms of polio include the virus in the blood, fever, headache, nausea, and muscle pain. If the virus remains in the blood, it can travel to the brain and spinal cord. Once it invades the neurons, it leads to flaccid paralysis, which resembles a floppy wet noodle. Virtually everywhere in the brain can be affected, and breathing may be affected to the point that mechanical respirators may be required. Muscles also start to atrophy or decrease in size. Polio is caused by the polio virus and is resistant to acid, bile, and detergents, which help it to survive in the stomach. After ingestion, the virus attaches to cells in the oropharynx and intestine. They replicate and can be shed in the throat and feces. Depending on how many virions are in the blood, some individuals may be asymptomatic, have mild symptoms, or experience paralysis. The mode of transmission for polio is the fecal-oral route, or a vehicle. Polio can be treated with supportive therapy like pain-relieving drugs, ventilators, or physical therapy. Polio can be prevented with vaccinations. Here in the United States, the inactivated poliovirus vaccine is administered. Meningoencephalitis is a disease that infects both the brain and meninges. It is caused by two different amoebas. These microbes enter under unusual cases. Naegleria fowleri can be found in warm bodies of fresh water. The amoeba enters the nasal passages during aquatic activities. It then makes its way to the brain and causes primary amoebic meningoencephalitis. The brain and spinal tissue are damaged, and death occurs within a week. The mode of transmission is a vehicle, specifically water. It is a very rare infection, but has a 97% fatality rate. Unfortunately, there's no treatment that has proven to be effective. Acanthamoeba is another microbe that can cause meningoencephalitis. The mode of transmission is direct contact. One example of a vulnerable population include contact lens wearers. Encephalitis is an inflammation of the brain. No matter if it's an acute or subacute form, it's still a serious situation. Inflammation leads to damage of the brain. Acute encephalitis is almost always caused by insects. West Nile virus is an example. The JC virus is also another causative agent. Bacteria are also associated with encephalitis. Some symptoms seen in acute encephalitis include confusion, loss of consciousness, seizures, as well as symptoms associated with meningitis. Acyclovir can be used in treating herpes virus encephalitis. Arboviruses are those caused by a vector, such as a mosquito. Arthropod-borne diseases typically occur in late spring to early fall. Many people are infected with arboviruses each year, and thousands even die from them. The mode of transmission differs for each arboviral disease. The bite of a mosquito introduces the virus into the host. The virus then persists in the blood and travels to the brain. The inflammation that occurs causes damage to the nervous system. Symptoms seen in arboviral encephalitis include coma, convulsions, paralysis, memory loss, and personality changes, just to name a few. Some patients experience some type of permanent brain damage. The majority of individuals will be asymptomatic. A wide variety of tests should be performed to diagnose these arboviral infections. Unfortunately, the only treatment option is supportive therapy. Mosquito control can be used as a preventative measure. Herpes simplex virus 1 and 2 can cause encephalitis in newborns. Other individuals are also affected by HSV1, which can lead to encephalitis. Varicella zoster, which also causes chickenpox and shingles, can also lead to encephalitis in rare cases. Subacute encephalitis can also occur years later. Toxoplasma gondii is a causative agent, along with persistent measles, as well as prions. Toxoplasma gondii can cause an infection in a fetus, as well as immunocompromised individuals. An interesting fact is that people who have been infected with Toxoplasma gondii display thrill-seeking behavior. The majority of cases are asymptomatic or mild symptoms like a sore throat and low fever are seen. Those who are immunocompromised suffer from encephalitis. Pregnant women also have a high risk of transmitting the disease, which can lead to stillbirths or significant damage to the fetus. This particular particular protozoan can live inside the host cells. It undergoes a sexual phase in cats. They shed the oocyst, which is shed in feces, and can be spread to rodents. The cycle continues by the cat eating the rodent. An interesting fact about this protozoan is that it affects the part of the rat's brain that makes it fear cats. The rodent is no longer afraid of the cats, so it goes near them and is eaten, which enables the protozoan's life cycle to continue. Roughly 90% of the population has been exposed to toxoplasma. The mode of transmission is a vehicle, like undercooked meat, and the handling of cat feces. The measles virus can cause subacute sclerosing panencephalitis years after a measles infection. There's no treatment, and it's pretty much always fatal. Prions are simply proteins which have no genetic information. They are associated with transmissible fungiform encephalopathies that lead to a rapid progression of damage. Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease is an example of one that affects humans. CJD leads to dementia, memory loss, out-of-character behavior, as well as delirium. Death usually occurs 1 year after diagnosis. The causative agent is a prion, which converts normal proteins into infectious ones. A sponge-like deterioration of the brain is seen. It can be transmitted genetically, and the prions are extremely resistant to control methods. Meat products that are contaminated with prions have been a source of infection as well as surgical instruments. Rabies is a zoonotic disease which comes from an animal. It leads to encephalitis and, left untreated, death. Depending on the location of the wound and inoculating dose, the incubation period may be up to 2 months. The earliest of symptoms include fever, nausea, a headache, and vomiting. Used to be that nobody survived rabies. However, long-term treatment has been successful. Rabies begins when the saliva of an animal enters the bite wound. It can also be acquired by inhalation or through the eye. The rabies virus replicates and travels the nerve endings to the brain, followed by other organs. The viral life cycle is complete once the virus makes it to the salivary glands, replicates there, and is then shed. Rabies has multiple stages and almost always ends in death if treatment is not begun before symptoms appear. The rabies virus has a specific envelope glycoprotein that enables the virus to continuously spread in the nervous system. The mode of transmission is parenteral, through the bite of an infected animal or through droplet contact. Only a small amount of cases occur here in the U.S. Depending on geographical location, the reservoir will differ. Here in Texas, the main reservoir is the Fox. Multiple tests must be performed to diagnose rabies. Treatment includes both passive and active post-exposure immunization. This includes human rabies immune globulin to prevent the spread of the virus. High-risk groups can receive doses to protect against exposure. Tetanus, also known as lockjaw, is caused by the bacterium Clostridium tetani. This bacterium can be found in soil and GI tracts of animals and is an endospore former. C. tetani releases a toxin that prevents the muscle from relaxing. The muscles are uncontrollably contracting. The initial symptoms are the locked jaw, arching of the back, flexion of the arms, and extension of legs. A sardonic grin gives the appearance that the patient is always smiling. Death may occur via the paralysis of respiratory muscles. Both the bacterium and endospore need to be present to initiate the infection. As that vegetative cell thrives, the toxin is released, spreads to nerve endings, and prevents the release of neurotransmitters. Here we can see the organism entering through the wound and exerting its effect on the nervous system. You can also see the sardonic grin. The mode of transmission is parenteral, through puncture wounds, for example, and also via direct contact. There's a low amount of cases here in North America. Most cases are seen in geriatric patients and drug users. Once tetanus is suspected, antitoxin therapy, immunoglobulins, and penicillin G should be administered. Vaccines provide preventative measures. Boosters should be received every 10 years. Botulism is another infection caused by bacterial toxins. It used to be a common infection. There are 3 types. Infant botulism is the most common, and raw honey is seen in some of the cases. There's also foodborne botulism, along with wound botulism. The toxin travels to the neuromuscular junction of skeletal muscles. Its target is acetylcholine. It prevents its release and prevents muscles from contracting. Flaccid paralysis, which is the opposite of tetanus, occurs. Symptoms are seen within 12 to 72 hours. The first symptoms include double vision, a difficulty swallowing, and dizziness. Later, paralysis is seen along with respiratory complications. The causative agent is the bacterium Clostridium botulinum, which releases exotoxins and is an endospore former. There are multiple types along with multiple exotoxins. The health department and CDC should be notified of any causes. Antitoxins are used as treatment along with mechanical ventilation if necessary. Botulism has a 5% mortality rate. Again, this image outlines all of the diseases and categorizes them by their causative agents.